Hi, Peter Charles here, Hooked Fly Fly Fishing. And today we're going to do another one of my fly designs. It's the Goby or Sculpin design. It's a design I use in Lake Erie, imitating gobies, which smallmouth just love. And also you could use it in rivers as a sculpin imitation. It's a well-weighted fly, and on the end of an Airflow Streamer Max full sinker, I've hit bottom in over 20 feet of water with this pattern. So if you need to get down, it will get down. Now there are one or two things we have to watch out for when we do the pattern, and I'll discuss that as we go along. But tied correctly, it's a very, very effective pattern, and it's caught quite a few fish for me. So let's get started looking at the materials. My hook is going to be a size 2 streamer hook, and it's only a 3 extra long. And that's important. We need a large gape with this hook, but the shank doesn't have to be very long. So a shorter shank streamer hook in a size 2 is better than using a long shank in a size 4. You'll see why as we go through. You'll see that we need the gap space. I'm going to be using a large cone head, and I usually pick a gray or a black for this job. We're going to put some lead on the bottom, on the hook shank I should say, to get it on the bottom. My thread is a Vivus 10-aught in brown. We're going to use a copper rib. I'm going to use a laser dub in the Sculpin pattern for the body. The legs are a speckled tan. The hackle is speckled brown hen. And the wing is going to be this grizzly rabbit strip. You need some speckling in this pattern, so you get the speckling in the grizzly rabbit, in the speckled hen, and in the striped legs. So let's get started first with the lead. Once you've got a few wraps put on, you squish it together. Keep the wraps together. You need somewhere between 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, or maybe a centimeter if you were using metric, to get enough lead on here to have. You can vary the amount of lead you want to use. If you really want to get this down, use a lot, but always keep the lead at the front of the hook as opposed to the full shank. Okay, so that's a good amount. We'll stop there. Now, here's caution number 1. This fly is designed to ride upside down, but because it's not a clouser style, it is a little tippy. So if you have the cone a little off center, or you've got a lot of the material to one side, it will not keel properly. So what I normally like to do with this is I shove the lead up first into the cone, and I double check to make sure it's not going to distort it too much. Push that cone off to one side. And then I come in with my CA glue and put some on the shank. And then push that into the head. Now, you can see that it's still, in this particular case, this particular cone is actually bigger. The opening is bigger than the spiral of the lead. So you might want to take a moment, and so the lead is actually going right through. Here's a conundrum we have with this. If we get a cone which has a small hole, which is ideal for getting a nice tight fit here, a nice good fit, you can't get around the cape of the hook. If you go with a cone that has a large enough opening that you can get around the gape of the hook, now you run into this kind of problem. So what you could do here is make sure everything is square and then just leave it. And what you can do is I would just tilt it down a little bit. There we go. Make sure that's perfectly square. Now, you can let it sit and let this CA glue cure. And then you're free to start going on to the next step. If you're going to have any kind of off-centeredness, you want it tilting down a little bit when viewed in that fashion. So there's a little bit more of the weight of the cone under the hook shank than on top of the hook shank. Now we start our thread right behind, and we come forward and we put some wide wraps onto the lead. To help cover up the lead. We don't want the lead to move. Now we've got glue on there, so it's probably not going to move very much, but you could have some movement. Now we're going to move this all the way back. Now bring your thread right around the gape of the hook, well into the bend. Keep winding to make a bump. Okay, now bring it forward. Now there's a purpose for that bump that I put back there. When we put the wing on, we're going to be actually pushing it onto the point of the hook. You do not want your wing coming all the way around. You want it to stop at that point, so it stays flat with the body of the fly. If you allow that hook to bend around the end of the gape, it will actually act like a Mr. Twister and spin the fly as you retrieve it. Okay, now for the copper. Now you notice I am putting this on roughly level with the barb. There's a reason for that. Wind it forward, then wind it back. Because I do not want this copper, when I start winding the wing on, I do not want the copper to be behind the body. I want the copper to be in the body. And that way, when I start to wind, it does not bend the tail of the wing, I should say, of the fly over, and again causing a Mr. Twister problem. So now we get on to our dubbing. And I will put my first wrap or two behind the copper. Then come forward. And the purpose of that is, as I say, is to allow that wing to stand up and not get pushed down by the wire. And don't be afraid to lay on a fairly thick body. Okay, bring the dubbing up just up to where the lead stops. And then we're going to pull on our legs. Now I'm going to tie these on long. We'll trim them afterwards, but I'll start with just getting these on to start with. Pull them into position. They're going to move around a little bit when you do this, so you try and get them about correct. And we'll trim these even when we're done. Okay, when that looks about right, you're going to take some CA glue. Just drop it in there. And we're going to add some more dubbing. And bring it in front. Before the glue sets up, take a moment to put everything back into place, because things do move around. And okay, now at this particular point, I'm going to take a moment to trim off the front legs just to give me a bit of room. So we're going to have these. I usually keep my legs about the hook shank long, because I don't want them too long. First off, they get folded back and they don't vibrate as well. If you keep them shorter, they'll tend to stick out more. And secondly, if they're too long, they'll go around the gape of the hook, which is really a nuisance. I'll trim the back one a little shorter. There, now that won't go around the gape of the hook. The next step is the hen. Now what I'll do is I'm going to trim off a little bit of the bottom of this. We not want it too thick. Tied in by the tip. As I say, try to avoid getting full of glue, because the glue will sometimes still be a little bit wet. Come in and trim off your tip. Now carefully fold these back. Just come around your legs very carefully. Just keep them behind the leg. I should say in front of the legs. There we go. Now for our rabbit strip. We want a rabbit that's going to be roughly, we want the leather part of it to be roughly 2 inches long. Now the rabbit will have a natural direction in which it lies, so we want the fur pointing back. And what I do here is take a little bit of the fur off the front, just a bit, to give me a tying in point. And you see that one's not square, so I'm just going to square that off. There we go. Remember, keeping everything in balance and in line, so even little inaccuracies can have an effect. So what I do is I put this in the front, just hold it in position, and mark on my fingers, like that, where I'm going to hold on to that, because I'm going to have to then push it on to, make sure you're right square in the middle, push onto the leather. Now, take the wing off, take the hook off, I should say, the vise, so you can move the wing around. And I find it easier at this point to put the hook back on the vise upside down. It gives you a better sense of how this is going to go. And now I will put some wraps in here to hold this in place. Now you notice that is sticking up a fair bit. I'll just come in with my razor blade and very gently take that off. And I'll use the thread to push it down and get it behind, right behind the cone. And usually you can use your fingernail, shove it into the cone. It just makes it a little bit more durable. Now I'll flip it back upright for the last stage, which is wrapping the copper wire. I take my bodkin here and push the hair away from where I'm wrapping my copper. And take a moment, if you're pushing things around, take a moment to get it all lined up again. It will move on you as you do this. And take a moment to pull any trapped hair out. Make sure you don't trap a leg like I just did. If you do, back off the pressure. Pop the leg out. There we go. This gets to be a fiddly bit. You want that wing to be riding square. You don't want to catch any legs. You want to catch the minimum amount of hair. You don't want to have too much hair being trapped by the copper. And so this is just tedious. You just keep working at it. See, I'm picking away the hair with my bodkin so it doesn't get trapped. Making sure I don't get the leg trapped. There's a little bit of hair in there that's trapped, so you pull that out. If you take your time pulling out the hair as you go, you will find that you will have a much neater job. I'm always checking to make sure the wing stays on top. If you see hair trapped, as I say, take your bodkin, pull it out. It's much easier to do it at this stage than it is later on when you've got everything all put together and done, and then you find the hair trapped. It also helps you find out if your wing is going crooked. You can see it more easily. Again, I use the bodkin to keep the hackle and the rubber legs out of the way. And there we go. Pick that through. Brush that down. There you go. Pull the leg out of the way. We're almost to the end here. If this wasn't such an effective pattern, I would go through all this bother. But this thing works so well. It's worth the effort. Very annoying, though, when you lose a fly to the bottom. After putting in all this work. Okay, so I don't want to get the hackle trapped here, so I'm going to pick some hackle out and get it around the hackle. Put a turn or two in behind the cone. Now we're going to finish it off. And then just try and helicopter it off if you can. Sometimes it comes off, sometimes it doesn't. There we go. That one came off clean. Okay, push everything back. Your hackles, your rubber legs, your rabbit hair. And bind that all in. This is the opportunity to straighten anything that you see as crooked. One final bit of straightening, and then I'll come in on underneath with my CA glue and just put a blob right in there to hold the thread, hold the wire, hold everything. So there we go. There's the Sculpin pattern. Very effective. I've caught a lot of fish on this pattern. And that wing really moves quite well. One of the things you could do if you wanted to, you could taper off this section. I don't bother with this particular fly, but you could taper that down, bring it to a point if you wanted to. And as I say, you can go around at this stage of the game, just check, make sure everything's in alignment. As I said earlier, if you get things out of alignment with this fly, its keeling tendency is right on the edge. So it will stay upright if everything's lined up. But if you get things off center, then it will tend to go to one side or the other. But this will catch a ton of fish. And it will get down where the fish are. And with that cone head, it's relatively snag resistant. It tends to bounce off of rocks. One last little step with this particular cone having a large opening. So where the lead came through, you go with a little touch of CA glue right there where the lead is starting to protrude, just to seal that off. Fiddle to tie. Ugly looking fly when you're done, but it catches smallmouth like you wouldn't believe. It's great to use. And as I say, I've caught a ton of fish doing it. And you can see how the wing does not curve around. It stays pretty well straight. And that's what you're looking for. You do not want that wing to be pushed down off the end of the gape and turning it into a Mr. Twister. And that's the reason why we bring the body right up around like that. So when you pull your wing on, it can't go any further and it stays flat. So there we go. The Sculpin, or the Goby, however you want to call it, whether you're fishing Lake Erie or you're fishing the inland rivers, it's a great pattern and it catches smallmouth. So give it a try. Cheers.